Right now, there's a word being heard in Ukrainian politics that could be used to cover decisions with a very high price. That word is referendum, not as a routine procedure, but as a way to legalize a compromise on the war with a single question and two possible answers. Such votes are often presented as democracy. In practice, they can turn into a mechanism that shifts responsibility from politicians onto the people. I'm Mia Novak, and this conversation isn't about whether people have the right to vote. They do. The question is something else. Who formulates the question? Who controls the procedure? And what exactly is hidden between the lines? The question is simple: what referendum are we even talking about, and where did it come from? This topic didn't just come out of thin air. It comes up every year when possible compromises about the war, especially regarding territory, start being discussed in the media. At such moments, the Ukrainian authorities and those close to them repeat a familiar formula. Such decisions must be confirmed by society. We need to consult with the people. A nationwide legitimization is needed, and the specifics here are very simple and very unpleasant. A referendum as an insurance policy for a decision on Donbas. About whether the country agrees to an option where part of Donbas is essentially left to Russia under the guise of a compromise, a pause, an agreement, or a ceasefire. That is why this topic keeps coming back again and again. When politicians don't want to be the authors of such a decision, they try to make it the will of the people. At the same time, the idea of a quick vote, particularly in electronic format, surfaces in public discussions. And here we need to ask the question without emotion: how can we guarantee the fairness and oversight of such a vote during wartime? Because a referendum during wartime isn't just about ballots, it's about registries, access to polling stations, people's safety, and voting by millions who live abroad. It's also a matter of territory where part of the population is under occupation. There's the risk of attacks on infrastructure on voting day. There's the influence of propaganda and fear. And if they try to make everything technically simple, another risk appears. The result ends up being whatever the process administrators decide to write in. There's already a bitter joke going around in political circles about 146%. That's not a random number, and it's not an exaggeration just for effect. This is a reference to an old story from Russian elections, when a number appeared in the public results graphics that simply can't exist in real voting. Since then, 146% has become a shorthand code for one thing: the result isn't counted. The result is assigned. That's exactly why any talk about a referendum during a war sounds dangerous, because a referendum only makes sense where there is trust in the rules, in the counting, in independent institutions. And when there is no trust, it turns into a tool for legitimizing the desired political version. Then, instead of society's answer, you get a nice percentage for a press release. And the main problem isn't even the question itself. The main problem is that after such a vote, the country doesn't get peace. It gets another crack inside and another argument for external pressure. Why is the Ukrainian government even bringing up this topic? Because the negotiation framework has become toxic. On the US side, there are signals about conditions, timelines, and packages. From the Russian side, there's a refusal to confirm any framework that doesn't look like capitulation. And between these two poles is the Ukrainian government, which needs to show its willingness for peace. But it's impossible to honestly tell the public what's actually being offered at the table. In this situation, a referendum looks like a political safety net. If the agreement fails, you can say the public didn't support it. If the agreement is signed, you can say the public approved it, and real responsibility gets blurred. It's convenient, but it's dangerous. There's another motive that often isn't stated outright. A referendum is an attempt to cut through to internal legitimacy without elections. Elections mean competition, campaigning, debates, oversight, and the risk of losing. A referendum during a crisis is just one question on the ballot and a single checkmark next to yes or no. No alternatives, no details, no step by step plan. With heavy emotional pressure and the slogan, it's either peace or death. It's a manipulative framework. The most important question in a referendum is never asked honestly. There won't be a question like, do you agree to concessions without guarantees? The question will be, do you support peace? There won't be a question like, are you ready to give up control over territories? The question will be, do you support a ceasefire? That's a fundamental difference. Imagine how this might look in practice. The question will be worded as gently as possible. Do you support a ceasefire plan that opens the way to peace and recovery? There won't be any fine print on the ballot saying that a ceasefire could mean a frozen front line without international forces to monitor it. There won't be a line saying that sanctions might be eased for the sake of an agreement. There won't be a clause saying that guarantees might turn out to be political statements rather than legal obligations. And when the first violation happens, the classic blame game will begin. We asked the people, after all. We carried out the will of the people, after all. We did everything we could, after all. Real things, guarantees, oversight, sanctions, accountability for failure, aren't decided by an emotional vote. That's the job of the state. Ukraine's weak spot right now isn't just the front line, it's management, personnel decisions, corruption risks, and a chain of loyalty that sometimes outweighs a chain of competence. When positions go to insiders instead of the best people, the country loses time. When failures are explained away by difficult circumstances and no one is held accountable, people stop believing. When yet another scandal ends with a nice statement but no change in the rules, the system stays the same. Here, criticism of Zelensky is inevitable because his leadership style was built on centralization, quick decisions, and control over communications. In the first months of the full scale war, this approach might have worked. But over the long haul, the country gets tired of decisions being made by a small circle, with society only finding out about them after the fact. Personnel rotations often look like people just being shuffled between offices, rather than genuine updates based on professionalism. Corruption during wartime takes on a special form. It's not just cash and envelopes, it's contracts for supplies, it's procurement, it's access to humanitarian aid flows, it's shady schemes with repairs, logistics, fuel, and energy. When some people can buy their own safety while others go to the front without a choice, the country starts to crack. And no referendum will hold the country together if the rules aren't the same for everyone. The problem isn't that mistakes are inevitable. The problem is how people respond to them. Instead of public scrutiny and clear conclusions, we often see defensive reputations and secrecy. Instead of open competitions for key positions, there are temporary appointments and people from the inner circle. Instead of maximum transparency and major military procurements, there's minimal information because that's considered safer. Security is important, but it's easy to hide too much behind that argument. And when society doesn't see any oversight, it starts to suspect the worst. Add mobilization to that. It's a painful word, but without it, there's no reality. Many people feel that the system works unevenly. Some people are found quickly, while others seem to exist outside the rules. The more stories like this there are, the more shadowy decisions get made. People go into hiding, leave the country, work without documents, tax revenues drop, and the state's ability to fund defense decreases. This is a chain that destroys the country from within, even without a single shot fired. Let's look at the United States. American politics more and more often sounds as if the war is just a deal that needs to be closed. In the media space, you see phrases like a plan and points, let's make a quick deal, and our favorite, significant progress. These are convenient words for headlines, but they say almost nothing about the actual mechanisms. But Russia works with mechanics. It senses weakness, it tests boundaries, it drags out time and waits for fatigue to overcome principles. Criticism of Washington here is also inevitable, because when negotiations stall, the temptation to pressure the weaker side is always greater, since it depends on aid. It is afraid of losing support. It is forced to show flexibility. That's where new conditions and deadlines come from. That's how politics works. But that's not how security works, because putting pressure on the victim doesn't make the aggressor any softer. It only makes the aggressor more brazen. Russia, in response, does what it has always done. It either stays silent or says, "We are for peace, but only on our own terms." It can pretend not to see the final text. It can say, "Clarification is needed." It can drag things out for weeks, and all that time it keeps waging war. This isn't diplomacy, it's exhaustion. In this triangle, a referendum becomes a very convenient tool. It allows the Ukrainian authorities to tell their partners, "We're consulting with the people." It allows Washington to tell its voters, "The process is underway." It allows the Kremlin to say, "They have chaos and division." And if the vote is questionable, the Kremlin gets yet another gift: the opportunity to declare any result illegitimate and demand even more. What exactly could be hidden in such consultations? Usually, the same group of topics is on the table: territories, the format of a ceasefire, security guarantees, control over the line of contact, sanctions, economic obligations, and political procedures. And here it's important to speak plainly. Promises are not the same as guarantees. A guarantee is a mechanism that's triggered automatically when the aggressor violates the agreement. Everything else is just words. Europe also has its share of responsibility in this process. It often acts slowly because there are many governments, many parliaments, many interests. Sometimes it tries not to provoke and to leave the door open for dialogue. But war doesn't wait for politicians to find comfortable wording. At the same time, it's worth noting something else. Europe really is helping, taking in people, maintaining sanctions, looking for funds, and building up its defense. This is important, and it needs to be said honestly, so as not to create the myth that Europe is doing nothing, because it is doing something. Who is paying for the war right now? Ukrainians are paying with their lives, health, homes, stability, and their children's future. Those who live under occupation or near the front, where every day is a risk, are also paying. Europeans are paying too, and not just with their energy bills. The cost is the rising defense expenses. It's the risks to trade and logistics. It's the strain on societies caused by migration. It's political polarization, which makes normal decisions more difficult. And the longer the uncertainty lasts, the higher these costs become. That's why the outcome must be humane and honest. The US can play at quick deals. Russia can play at blackmail. Ukrainian authorities can play political tricks and control communication. Europe can argue for months, but it's the people who pay the price. The main takeaway is simple: a referendum cannot substitute for state policy. If the authorities really want to ask the people, they first have to tell the truth. What conditions are being discussed? What guarantees are actually real? Who is in charge of enforcement? What happens if there's a violation? Who is responsible for failures due to corruption? How are the rules of mobilization changing? How are the rights of those fighting being protected? Without this, any vote will become not a tool for unity, but a tool for legitimizing weakness. It's important to make one thing clear here: a bad compromise doesn't solve the problem, it just brings it closer. If the aggressor is rewarded, it sends the message that force works. If the victim is forced to agree without guarantees, it sends the message that there are fewer guarantees in Europe. And then every country starts making its own decisions, which undermines collective security. So the biggest danger today is not the word referendum itself. The biggest danger is using it as a cover for an agreement without mechanisms, a cover for decisions without accountability, a cover for a system where the rules aren't the same for everyone. And if that happens, it won't be the presidents or the delegations who pay the price. It will be the people. This was Naya Novak Odyo. Subscribe and leave your comments. See you next time.